What does faith mean to you? Is it important in your life? Not so much? Or even a problem? What do we mean by faith? Just one thing or several different things? How do we know things? Do we need faith to know things? Can we just have working assumptions? Or do we in fact know things absolutely that don't require either faith or working assumptions? Is faith helpful in knowing things or an obstacle to it? Do you have faith in faith? Welcome back to the Religion of Good. I'm Ivan, and today I am going to be reacting to a dialogue between a University of Toronto professor, John Vervaeke, and Bishop Maximus of the Orthodox Church. The link to that video is in the description below. In this dialogue, Maximus explains to Vervaeke his thoughts on epistemology, that is, the philosophy of how we know things. Drawing on the early Christian philosopher, Clement of Alexandria, he argues that faith is necessary to bridge the gap between our ability to know things absolutely and the assumptions that we base our imperfect knowledge on, such as trusting our perceptions or mathematical axioms. In this reaction video, I will present two counter-arguments. Firstly, why I disagree with Maximus, and secondly, I'll demonstrate how my way of thinking can work by giving a purely natural account of the gods. Stay tuned. I love John Vervaeke. His video series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, is one of the most amazing academic tours de force I've ever seen. It made the bibliography of my book, The Religion of Good. I'm indebted to John for giving me the vocabulary and grammar to talk about the spiritual subjects I cover in my book. I encountered him during the editing process, and my book is much enriched by his illumination of the subject. Now, most of his videos go way above my expectations, not to mention over my head. But this particular one left me cold. Now, to be fair, he's a bona fide university academic with multiple PhDs, and I'm sure that his interlocutor, Bishop Maximus, is very well educated as a churchman and a leader in the Orthodox Church, whereas I am only a well-educated intellectual priest of an obscure religion called Wicca with a BA in Greco-Roman classics from Reed. So apologies ahead of time for all the academics in the audience if I missed something. My initial reaction to the video was ill-placed anger. Now, I quickly realized, however, that what was boiling up came from my own assumptions that were being challenged, which is a good thing, right, in dialogue. Rather than giving in to the vice of polemic, I realized that what I ought to do is engage in the virtue of dialogue. So I hope what I have to say is taken well. And to be clear, I'm not angry. I was not angry at anybody. It was more like I was had this emotional reaction, or negative emotional reaction to the subject, for reasons will become clear. But I bear no ill will to either Bishop Maximus and certainly not to John Vervaeke. So, in interest of full disclosure, I have not read Clement of Alexandria or David Hume, the other philosopher that Maximus mentions, though I think I understand the empiricism and the scientific method that Hume is known for, and I have reasonable working knowledge of Hume's basic ideas. So these are two philosophers that Maximus mentions in his talk, and I'm just need to be clear that I'm not a philosopher. I don't have a PhD in the subject, so so this video is meant to be dialogical, not polemical. If at any point I sound harsh in my reactions, they are not meant to offend anyone, but merely to put forward my position. I have great respect for both gentlemen. So, Maximus's question, which he discusses in the video I'm reacting to, is a very old one. How do we know things? This is called epistemology in philosophy. It's the worry that many philosophers have, that a lot of what we think we know is based on things that we're only assuming. Okay, so perception via the five senses, right? Is that something we can really trust? So, science is based on empiricism, and empiricism is based on the five senses. So if we can't trust our senses, then is there something wrong with empiricism, right? Are we in the Matrix, for instance? Is what we're seeing an optical illusion or a hallucination? Or maybe the famous illusionists, Penn and Teller, set up a stage magic trick to fool us. Who knows? If our perceptions can't be trusted, it would seem that science doesn't know anything, since it's entirely dependent on observation. So with math, it may seem obvious that for any given numbers a and b, a plus b equals b plus a, right? But mathematical proofs are based on deductive logic. Deductive logic is a series of propositions, each following from the last. If the logic is sound, that is, if every subsequent proposition makes sense based on the first one, we say that the philosopher's argument is logical, right? But if every proposition must be supported by another proposition, how do we know what facts we can count on to support the first proposition? So consider this logic. All elephants are pink. Polly is an elephant. Therefore, Polly is pink. Logical? Perfectly. So what's the problem? Elephants aren't pink, right? How do we know there aren't two numbers, for example, that are not commutable, according to the commutative property of addition, which is one of the axioms of mathematics? It seems obvious, and I can't see any way that that particular one wouldn't be true, but the question is, can we do mathematical proofs if we don't know the axioms? Do they actually prove anything, right? So, let's dig a little further. In my book, The Religion of Good, I'm keenly aware that we have trouble knowing what's good. Assumptions in can radically change conclusions out. Knowledge gets really tricky when we realize all the fights we have in the world over competing assumptions that each side swears is obvious, right? So before I tell you my opinion, let me unpack the fact that I see several different definitions of faith, and I think I know which one he means, but it wasn't exactly clear because he didn't distinguish among various different views of faith. So, the three types of faith that I can identify are what I call loyalty and trust, cosmic trust, and fides ex nihilo, which is a Latin phrase that I think I've coined, as far as I know, that means faith from nothing, but I basically coined it parallel to creation ex nihilo, the concept of creation from nothing. So, to unpack these, loyalty and trust is a very down to earth sense of faith. It's like the faith we have in a friend. It means we are loyal to a friend and basically trust that friend. So, for example, if I'm your friend, you probably trust me and feel loyal to me, but that doesn't mean that you think I can fix your radiator. You might definitely think that I could help you with ethics or spirituality, but not fixing your radiator, because I don't know much about fixing radiators. Faith definition number 2, cosmic trust. So we might extend the concept of loyalty and trust, faith sub 1, to a concept of trusting the cosmos, divinity, humanity, something like that. That is something greater than ourselves. So if we fall on hard times, we might say, well, I have faith that God will somehow get me through this. Now, I don't know if that's a type of faith that is rational in any sense. I don't know if there's something that it actually affects physically, or if the cosmos deserves our trust or loyalty, but it certainly can get us through hard times psychologically. And that brings me to the final version, which is what I call fides ex nihilo, or faith from nothing in Latin. And this is the kind of faith where we believe something because we have faith in it, rather than because it makes sense. So it sounds to me like Maximus means this third kind, faith ex nihilo. And if that is in fact the type of faith that he does mean, then I disagree with him. From here on, I'm going to use that definition unless otherwise specified. So I'm sure that Maximus's faith in Jesus Christ, for example, led to great things like agape for all human beings. I mean, that's wonderful, but I am not convinced by his argument when it comes to faith being necessary to knowledge. Much of the argument seems circular to me. It seems like it relies on Christian assumptions. So, based on Maximus's quotes of Clement and what Maximus said about Clement, it seems like Clement assumes the existence of God as creator. He assumes creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing, and that our minds are created with a predilection for faith. Clement, it seems, also dismisses the Gnostics out of hand without explaining why. He also assumes that God is the surest thing, but how do we know that God exists? Why shouldn't the cosmos be the surest thing, for example? I don't see a strong argument here. I don't see why we need faith to do things like trust our senses until we find reason not to, or to assume that mathematical axioms are true. Why can't we simply acknowledge the limits of our knowledge? In fact, even though we may not know absolutely, aren't there good reasons to trust our senses under most conditions? They're predictably reliable, after all. They're not always reliable, certainly, but they're predictably so. Likewise, I know no example in which A plus B does not equal B plus A. It makes sense to me that if you put A stones in a bowl and then put B stones in a bowl, we'll have the same number of stones as if we did that in reverse, because my observation about numbers is that order doesn't matter when we're adding. So these aren't baseless assumptions, even if we don't, strictly speaking, know they're true. So there is some basis for working assumptions. And I don't understand why Maximus thinks that we need faith specifically rather than simply working assumptions. In fact, with all due respect to His Excellency, it seems to me that this type of faith can be hubristic. The gods may know the truth, but we mortals do not. I worry that it's hubris to think we know, and a good form of humility to admit the limitations of that knowledge. This keeps me humble and honest. I should note, for anybody who's not familiar with my book or my channel, that Wicca is more or less a polytheistic religion. So I'll refer to the gods, where Maximus may refer to God. I also may refer to Tahen, the One, from Neoplatonism, where he might refer to God as well. So let's continue. I worry that faith can lead to holy wars and religious friction. I'm sure Maximus loves the Jesus story, has been transformed by it, and has been led to feel agape for all human beings, as I've said. But what happens if one group of people have, let's say, Christian faith, and another have Muslim faith? It seems likely that they'll have conflicts. Now, this is certainly mitigated by the Enlightenment concepts of freedom of religion and a separation of church and state. Even if these two groups don't go to war, two different types of faith have led to two different conclusions. It doesn't seem like faith helps us centralize. So I don't see what faith has to do with knowledge. On the other hand, assumption without faith keeps us humble in a good way. There are two kinds of humility that I see. Self-deprecating humility is, to me, a vice, whereas true humility, from the belief in equal sacredness among all of us and the conviction that none of us is greater than another, is a virtue. True humility is a balance between the twin vices of self-deprecating humility and of arrogance, a la Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Assumptions without faith keep us virtuously humble, I believe. As a faithless pagan, when I encounter a Muslim or Christian, I don't say they're wrong, merely that I disagree. By avoiding hubristic faith, I leave religious questions open, while I observe my senses to be typically trustworthy, and thus trust the scientific method. I remain open-minded as to whether, for example, Pluto is a planet. This allows us to centralize on certain things while leaving other questions open. And I think that's a better process at getting at the truth. Faith actually obfuscates that process, in my opinion. I would go as far as to say that faith can lead to evil. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily, and I'm certainly not implying that Maximus is, in any way using faith in that way. But in my country, the US, I see our politics riddled with ideological cults, each of which can said to be guilty of this unvirtuous type of faith. So let's begin with the cult that's currently running my country, the MAGAs. They have so much faith in Trump that they seem to think it's okay for the government to hurt peaceful protesters. There are these militant pro-Palestinians who are willing to murder Jews and destroy synagogues out of faith that all Jews are inherently complicit in the Israeli government's oppression of Palestinians. I feel strongly that cancel culture is another example of this. Canceling someone crosses a line for me. Boycotting is fine and, in fact, good, because if someone sells an apple one day, that doesn't mean I have to buy one the next day, particularly if that person is racist or something. But cancel culture says that the apple seller shouldn't even be able to bring their cart to the marketplace. Regardless of how much we may feel that people who say nasty things about other groups may deserve it, cancel culture attacks other people's careers. It's a form of social violence that hurts people. It's playing judge, jury, and executioner, and is thus unjust. Bigotry is obviously really bad, and something must be done about it. But two wrongs don't make a right, and there are more just and less violent ways to respond to it. So, for instance, we can remember that famous quote, usually attributed to Voltaire: "I hate what you say, but I'll defend with my life your right to say it." I can't see how free speech can survive if anybody can destroy free speech or oppress free speech simply by saying that they're offended, even deeply hurt by what somebody else has said. We have to have some sort of room for people to be able to say nasty and offensive things. Unfortunately, that's just part of the unfortunate consequence that free speech entails. But without it, we have authoritarianism, and that's much worse, in my opinion. Then we come to Christian nationalism. Now, again, this is not polemical. I'm not in any way trying to imply that Bishop Maximus, as an Orthodox bishop, is a Christian nationalist. I don't think he is. But these theocrats have a faith that leads them to overthrow the Enlightenment. They deny the separation of church and state. They deny that America was founded as a nation without a national religion, which in fact it was. They just lie about it. They freely bear false witness. I mean, they claim to believe in the Ten Commandments, right? But they violate that one in doing so. They probably believe in conversion by the sword, and I have reason to believe that they do, from talking to ex-fundamentalist Christians and evangelical Christians. They certainly believe that the U.S. government can and should impose Christian values on its citizens. This is another example of faith leading to evil, in my opinion. Universalism is good. Tribalism is evil. The Enlightenment is good because it's universalist. Theocracy is evil because it's tribalist, in that it claims that one's own tribe, one's own religion, has a unilateral line to the truth that other religions don't have, and that they get to force their way on everyone else. For me, the cure for these ideologies is for everyone to become more humble in the good way that I've suggested, to admit that we don't know, and to admit that we merely assume. In fact, I'd argue that we have an ethical obligation to be faithless in the faith ex nihilo sense. Faith, in that sense, requires that we take offense at those who disagree with things we take on faith, or would seem so. To have faith is something that is sacred. That is, the thing you have faith in is sacred to you. So if someone disagrees with you, it is not seen by the faithful as merely a disagreement, but as an attack on something held sacred. But the faithful have set themselves up to feel offended and to feel obliged to be offended. Why should we ever hold our interlocutors as enemies when they simply have a different opinion? We have no reason to believe they bear us ill will or to be offended just because they disagree. Moreover, faith ex nihilo erodes faith in the first sense of trust and loyalty. Faith in MAGA erodes the trust that the rest of the country has in you. Faith in sort of cancel culture variety of kind of wokeism erodes the trust that the rest of us who oppose bigotry but have a different account of identity politics have in the cancel culture wokeists. Faith in Christian nationalism erodes the trust of other religions and Enlightenment-formed Christians, which I think are most Christians today. Faith in anti-Semitic pro-Palestinianism that goes so far as to be violent erodes faith in Jews who are also critical of the Israeli government. Let me confess, though, that what I've said is actually incomplete. John Vervaeke has said repeatedly that there's a great danger in deconstructing everything, for that leads to nihilism. So too does my argument for faithlessness unless I amend it. What remains is for me to show a way forward without faith. Otherwise, all I'll have done at best is obliterate faith as a vice without replacing it with a virtue. So allow me to be self-critical of what I've just said. During the pandemic, I grimly faced the possibility that my pagan gods might be false, that I might simply end when I die rather than reincarnate, as Wicca typically teaches, and that my life might have no inherent meaning. These worries were incredibly terrifying, as you can imagine. What got me through it? The second kind of faith I listed, cosmic faith. This is not the type of faith ex nihilo that I think Maximus is arguing to bootstrap knowledge. It was faith that I would not lead myself to the edge of oblivion, but instead find something good and beautiful once I got to the other side of the brick wall I was banging my head against. I was like the fool in the tarot card, stepping off that cliff. I faced the dark night of the soul without any assumptions, but I trusted that somehow the cosmos would catch me. When I finally came through my dark night of the soul, I came to an account of divinity that does not require faith in the fides ex nihilo sense. So I came up with 13 points, which are as follows. 1. There is no point at which I end and the cosmos begins. There is no point at which the cosmos ends and you begin. We flow into each other. We are all part of a fluid whole, not a monolithic whole, but a fluid one. Now, this and many of these other points are by no means original to me, but these are points at which I went, oh my gosh, like it totally makes sense what I've, the prevailing wisdom that I've heard about certain things that really clicked suddenly, right? So, number 2, the cosmos as a whole was never created and will never be destroyed, the Big Bang notwithstanding. Even physicists need either the Big Crunch, Big Bang theory or the multiverse theory to account for where the Big Bang exploded out from. The cosmos is bigger than the universe. The universe may have been created by the Big Bang, but the cosmos itself was never created and will never be destroyed. Cf. Celestiuses on the gods and the world. So Celestius, in case you don't know, is a pagan Neoplatonist from late antiquity. I don't believe in creation ex nihilo because that begs the question where and when the creator was prior to space and time. Number 3, I am part of the cosmos, per 1. If the cosmos is a sea, I arise from it, I swell, I crest, I crash back into it. I never entered the cosmos and will never leave it. But at one time, I was not conscious. At one time, I may well cease to be conscious. And I am not a discrete being anyway. I am only a pattern of ever-changing atoms that will eventually cease to hold that pattern. Number 4, we are sentient, intelligent beings, and we form a peer-to-peer network. Cf. John Vervaeke, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. 5, the cosmos is thus intelligent and conscious through us. We might say it is God. I would say, as a pagan Neoplatonist, that it is part of Tahen, the one, the good, the beautiful, the true. But it's not the only part. I would say it's basically the world's soul, which is a term in pagan Neoplatonism, which I won't unpack here. But that's basically what I think I am talking about here. Number 6, my life has inherent meaning through ethics. If I lived my life selfishly, only ever serving my own needs, I would get to the end of my life realizing that it had no meaning beyond my own happiness, which was about to end. That would be hell, because I don't want my life to be meaningless. However, if I realize that I am part of a larger whole and serve all sentient beings, as a member of this peer-to-peer network, as a good cosmopolitan, a good citizen of the cosmos, my life comes to have meaning. It is not a meaning I choose unilaterally. It is part of the way the cosmos works when we include ourselves in the cosmos. Number 7, the subject of ethics is not people. It's relationships among people. Number 8, one of my gods is Hecate Soteria, Hecate the Savior. Among other things, she presides over crossroads and portals, that is, gates and doors. But does she exist? And can she save me? So, number 9. I came up with my own definition of a god, or atheos, in the polytheistic sense. This is somewhat a la Iamblichus's On the Mysteries, but it's my own definition. So I have 4 qualities. 1, a god is ineffable, cannot be spoken of directly. 2, a god is mysterious, fundamentally unknowable, not in any absolute sense anyway. 3, a god is Platonic form-ish. And 4, a god is intelligent by some account of intelligence. So, thought number 10, post Dark Night of the Soul, crossroads and portals, which Hecate presides over, are 2 examples of liminality. And 11, liminality is a deity, as I have just defined one. It is ineffable. To speak of it would be to speak something that's not liminal. To speak of something that's not liminal. Therefore, it cannot be known either, so it's also mysterious for the same reason. It is Platonic form-ish, we can speak of liminality itself by itself, not just provide examples of liminal things. It is intelligent by the following account. We sentient intelligent beings are a peer-to-peer network. This only operates across our relationships, and relationships are liminal. Therefore, we need liminality to have this peer-to-peer network type of intelligence, which, according to John Vervaeke, we possess. And finally, we have 12 and 13. So 12 is liminality is necessary for ethics, because the subject of ethics is relationships, and relationships, as I've said, are liminal. And number 13, Hecate, as goddess of liminality, among other things, saves me from a meaningless life by connecting me with others and plugging me into the world soul so that I can be ethical and thus give my life meaning. This salvation is transformative from my understanding of myself as a separate individual who is not part of the cosmos, to realizing that I am part of the world soul, which is embedded in the cosmos. I think what I have just shown is that divinity and salvation can be approached without faith ex nihilo. It may require me to trust my senses, but I trust them because they are as friends to me. In other words, I do not expect them always to serve me well, just as my friends should not rely on me to fix their radiators. But just as I will do my level best to fix my friend's radiator, if no one more knowledgeable is available, I trust my senses to do their level best by me, as it were. I may hallucinate or be fooled by Penn and Teller, but I trust my senses only because I find them to be predictably reliable. If faith simply means trust and loyalty, then I suppose that's one kind of faith. But I don't think it's a kind of faith that Maximus or Clement mean. I think they mean faith ex nihilo. We should not simply assume that something is true without basis. And that's really my worry here. But we don't need to know things in order to trust our axioms. There is a difference between assuming that gravity exists and assuming that Christ is divine. I experience the former, but have not personally experienced the latter, though obviously Maximus feels he has, and I'm sure he has. I know I've felt miracles from my deities. I'm sure he's felt miracles from his. I don't need faith to lead me to divinity or meaning. I can get both through a primarily material account, with some allowances for Platonic forms and that kind of transcendent stuff. But I think it's a fairly straightforward and reasonable account that does not require faith in the ex nihilo sense. I hope you've gotten a lot out of this discussion. What do you think? Did you come to agree with Maximus after watching the John Vervaeke Maximus video? Or did you disagree? What do you think about my analysis? Let's be polite and dialogical rather than rude and polemical. And until next time, be good, everybody.